everybody and welcome to Flock Talk. Today we're going to be talking all about clickers, the different types of clickers, how you use them, what they're for, and all those sorts of things. I've seen a lot of comments down in the comments section below most of my videos asking what the sort of clicking noises are in the background. Do you have to use one? Could you use a pen and things like that? So I figured I'd address all those questions now and just kind of give a little brief explanation over what clickers are, why trainers use them, what makes them so important, and the types of situations where you can decide not to use them and things like that. What exactly is a clicker? All a clicker is a device that makes a very consistent sound. Yes, you can absolutely use mechanical pencils, you can use pens, you can make the noise kind of like with your mouth. Whatever noise is easiest for you to make consistently. The reason why trainers tend to use clickers is because it's the exact same noise every single time, and it's an easy response to have. If you're training an animal and you get really excited that they did the right thing, and usually you make the noise with your mouth, it's very likely that you're going to make a different tone, or you're going to have a different timing, or you're going to just completely forget to make that noise altogether, and you'll end up making like a really excited, yay, oh my god, you did it, instead of the click that you would usually make with your tongue. When it comes to using a clicker, all you have to do is press a button, and it's really easy for you to get excited that the right thing happened and just tense your muscles. That's a very natural response for people to have. When you think about getting excited, you go, oh yay, and you tense up, which is why clicking a button is a really easy, quick response to have. For some people, it does take time to get used to, and there's a couple different games that I might explain later that go over how to teach yourself how to use a clicker and how to use it precisely. So when it comes to clickers, what you use isn't really necessarily the most important factor. It's how you use it and how consistent it is. When it comes to using a clicker in training, all it is it's a bridge device. And what that means is it is bridging the communication barrier between you and your bird. Obviously, they don't speak English, they don't understand, human language, they don't really know how to communicate with us, and this is an easy way to have something very consistent, very precise, that means positive things. Obviously, they don't know what it means right off the hop, and you do have to teach them what it means. And that's kind of why you can use any object you want if you wanted to pop a pencil or whatever, because it's not so much that it's a clicker. Any of these are all the same thing. It doesn't really matter that it's this, it matters that it's making one consistent noise. Because the more consistent it is, and the more precise it is, and the faster it is, the easier it's going to be for you to mark the exact moment that the bird or whatever animal you're training did the right thing. Now, when you're training and you have your mouth making the noise and you're making 6 different tones or 6 different durations, or you're not quite as precise with the sounds that you're making, they can mean a bunch of different things. When you think about the way a bird in particular communicates, it's all peeps. It's all the same sort of sound, just in different volumes, different tones, and different lengths. So if you're clicking to make the noise with your tongue, and you're clicking with different tones, and you're clicking with different volumes and different lengths, they can all have different meanings, and it's going to be a lot harder for your bird to understand that you're meaning the same thing every single time you do it. So a clicker is just the exact same noise, the exact same duration, the exact same length, over and over and over again, so it cannot have another meaning. It is the exact same sound every time, and it's a very precise, easy thing to understand. Now, the point of having that is to make your communication easy. That's why it's a bridge device. You're bridging that communication barrier. All it's doing is making basically the bird understand that, yes, you did the right thing. Yes, that's a positive thing to have done. Yes, that's what I want you to do. Yes, do that again. It's just positive, happy, good, yes, repeat that behavior. That's all these things mean. You can absolutely use pens, you can absolutely use, the tap of your foot on the floor, whatever's easiest for you to use if you find that handling these things in your hands is a little more complicated. What's important is that it makes the same sound, that it's the same amount of length, it's the exact same tone, and that you can do it quickly and easily at the exact moment you see them do the behavior that you want. That's kind of where things get to be a little trickier, is being able to do it quickly. And I'm going to show you how to hold a clicker to make it a little easier to communicate with your bird. So the way you want to hold a clicker is kind of up to the user and up to what sort of clicker you have. So this is the most standard clicker that you will see. This is called an opened box clicker. And all that means is that it's shaped like a box. and it's open. You've got the big metal plate in there that's open and exposed. These are the most basic ones, they're usually the cheapest. You can buy them for bulk online off of Amazon, and most pet stores will carry them. Both of these came from local pet stores. This one's from PetSmart, this one's from Pet Value. Most pet stores will carry this style of clicker because they're cheap, they're quick, they're easy. It's the most standard type for training, really. And I have mixed feelings about them. I find these very helpful for training dogs because they're loud. So if you're doing things like recall or you're doing agility where you're a little further away from one another, it's very loud, it's very easy to hear from any location. With training birds, however, I find these ones a little more awkward. I just find that they're so loud, and as many of you have commented, I'm in a very echoey room when I'm training the birds. So clicking is just unnecessarily allowed with these types of clickers. So if you were doing recall in an aviary outside or something, these could absolutely be helpful. And if you have a bigger bird that's not as sensitive to really loud noises being near it, then you may have no problem with these. These I've also had issues with for them not lasting as long. Open box clickers, I find there's a seam right along the side, and it often just starts to break and peel apart. I've had a couple that just absolutely exploded when I was using them, just because there's a seam there, it's pretty weak, and all the pressure from you pressing in the button actually kind of pushes up against that seam and is just going to slowly rip it open over time. With the closed button clickers that I'll show you a little later, I've never had an issue with those ones breaking apart. So these are fine, they're cheap, they're easy to find, and they'll do the job. With these ones, they're very, very loud, and they're awkward. So like this one, if I press it up here, no noise comes out. I have to hit it in the right spot in order to get it to go. And I just find that not very user-friendly because my finger instinctually as it bends goes upwards. And unfortunately with this clicker, it slides up and it doesn't hit the spot quite right. I really have to force myself to hit the right spot. So this one I really don't enjoy. This one is a lot better. No matter where I click it, it does go. And that makes it a lot easier because when you're thinking about it and you're training, you want to be able to quickly press it as fast as possible. These ones can be helpful for that because you have a very wide space here, where if you have one that's a little better quality and not gonna crap out on you when you press the wrong spot, it makes it easy because you're holding it and you're kind of loosely holding it because you're trying to maneuver your bird into the right position. You can quickly click it no matter where your finger is without having to think too hard about it. And it's kind of a big open space, so your finger will kind of naturally fall in there. These can be very helpful for that reason. But otherwise, I just don't use these very often. I use them more with training my dog than I do with training my birds. It's just kind of personal preference. The next type we have here are closed button clickers. And the reason why they're called that is because they're fully encased and you just have a button or two buttons that you have to press to make the click noise. I prefer these a lot more with birds because they're closed, the sound is muffled a bit more, it's a lot quieter. There can be some difficulty with using them depending on your personal preferences. I have no issues with these. I find my thumb naturally falls where the buttons are pretty easily. I've never had an issue with missing a button by chance. They tend to be, not too complicated to figure out how to use. However, if you have bigger hands or you have smaller hands, you may find that pressing buttons that are a little taller like this one might be a little bit more difficult for you, or at least this one might just be too shallow for you to be able to naturally find quickly. Again, it comes down to personal preference, where your hands naturally fit in these objects, and what's going to work best for you. There's no one clicker that's going to be better than the others. It's whatever you find easiest to train your animals with. But for me, I like these ones because it's precise, it's easy, and my hands fit into them really well, and they're nice and quiet in comparison to the open ones. I find them a lot quieter. This one in particular is my favorite one. This one was just given for free, so it's kind of a hollower plastic. It's a little louder, but the button is nice and soft, so it's easy to press down, which has its benefits. This one's a little stiffer, but I find the click is a little bit more toned, and you have two buttons, which I find particularly helpful, because if you're target training a bird, what I'll do is I'll hold it and use this one on the back, whereas if I'm doing something else, I may have it at the front and press the top one. So it kind of gives you that versatility. You can do the same thing with open box clickers. So if I had this one, I could just as easily do the same thing where I'd hold it in my thumb and click, or I could flip it around and press it with the back. I do find this a little bit more awkward than this. I just find this one's a little easier to hold, whereas my hand's a bit more crouched. It's virtually the same, but just because the button is a little bit out more, I find my hand doesn't have to crunch as much. But if you've got smaller hands, using the open box clicker to kind of crunch around it might be easier for you than it is for me. I do have very long, lanky fingers, which makes this a little bit harder for me personally. Button clickers tend to be a little bit harder to find, and they tend to be a little bit more expensive. I don't really know the reason for that. I guess there is a little bit more plastic to it. There's a little bit more put into making it than an open box clicker would. I mean, realistically, clickers are still gonna only be a couple bucks. It's not like some crazy expense. There are some that will sell themselves for ridiculous amounts of money, and they'll say that they're the best clicker ever and like they're magic. Don't fall for it. You don't need it. There's nothing fancy or great about them. Usually it just means that they're a little bit more durable and so the buttons might be a little easier to press. Really, you don't need to spend $10 on a piece of plastic with metal in the middle. You really shouldn't be spending more than $4 or $5, like at most. But you don't need anything that fancy. You just need something basic that's going to make a consistent noise. As long as it doesn't break down really quickly and as long as you can easily press the button, that's all you really need out of a clicker. How do we go about teaching your dog or cat or bird or lizard what this noise means? It's really, really easy. You just have to be kind of doing it constantly for the first little while. So obviously when I clicked this, the first time I got them, the birds would have no idea what this means. I'm clicking it and Newt's leaning down my shoulder because he thinks it means he deserves a treat, which is the response we want to get. Basically, when you first get your clicker, you're going to want to click it a little bit further away from your animal because they've never heard it before. You don't know how they're going to react. You don't want to hold it right beside them and click it and then have it cause a fear response, and now you've created this connection where your animal thinks anytime they hear that noise, something bad's going to happen or they're scared. So you want to make sure you click it kind of behind your back or off to the side, just to make sure that they're comfortable with the noise and that they're not having that fear response, and kind of work up to it. Once you can tell that they're comfortable with the noise and they're not going to be scared of it and things like that, then you can move on to actually conditioning them to understand what that noise means. And it's not a complicated process, it's quite easy. All you're going to do is kind of be lounging around with them, randomly click it and give it a treat. They don't need to be doing anything, they don't need to be behaving a certain way. I generally just aim for when they're calm and relaxed and not really expecting it, because then they're kind of la-di-da doing whatever, they hear the noise and food comes. And you want to pair it as fast as possible, so basically you want to be clicking and handing them food at the same time. So that way they're making the connection that the noise and the food are happening unanimously, so the brain can connect them a little bit easier. As you train and as they get used to the noise, you're able to click, have them think they're getting something, and then give it to them. Because you're starting to train the brain that every time they hear that noise, a food item or a reward or something positive is going to happen. That response is easy to get in most animals. They're not stupid, they'll figure it out pretty quick. You know they've got it when you click the sound and they start acting a little bit more excited, or you click the noise and their head perks up and they look towards you, or they're lounging around, you click it and they might come flying straight at you because they know you've got food, you're going to give it to them. And that's kind of when you start to know that they're recognizing that that noise means that something positive is going to be coming, that a reinforcer is going to be coming. Once you have that response, then you can go ahead and start training with the clicker. Technically speaking, you can train with a clicker from the get-go. However, it's going to take a little bit for them to understand what it is, and you're more likely to get frustrated. Generally, as soon as you start using a clicker, I find that people expect them to already know what it means, and they don't. They really don't. When you start making that noise, they'll start making those connections over time. But when you're trying to teach them a trick and teach them what a sound means and teach them, how to be training in the first place, it's a lot to get used to, it's a lot that they don't understand, and it's gonna take a lot longer for them to figure things out. So having those extra steps where you're just kind of sitting on the couch, clicking and giving them treats, they're gonna make those connections a lot faster. So when you get into actually training and learning and doing all those fun things, it'll be a lot easier because they'll already know what the sound of the click means. So how exactly does this sound, the sound of clicker, bridge the communication barrier? How does it do that? It does that by them knowing that it's a positive thing, that it means that they've done the right thing. So by doing that training where you've made a click, given them a treat, made a click, given them a treat, done that over and over and over again until you click and get that response of, ooh, you're gonna give me something, ooh, something's coming, oh, I've done the right thing. They know that this means treats. They know this means a toy. They know this means whatever meaning you've given to it. That something positive is happening, that they've done the right thing, that something great is about to be coming. Now that that noise has that meaning, anytime they do something, like if I was teaching you to wave, every time he lifted his foot, I click, he knows, yes, that was the right thing. The exact moment my foot was in the air, that sound happened. Putting my foot in the air is what I'm going to be doing again. It makes it easier for that communication to occur where they can make those connections. Now, just because the clicker does that for you and makes it a little easier for you to have that communication, doesn't mean it's going to work 100% of the time if you are inconsistent with it. Your knowledge of how to use the clicker is just as important as your bird's knowledge of what the clicker means. If you're not precise with your clicking, if you're clicking way after behaviors have happened, if you're misclicking when they haven't done anything yet, or you're jumping the gun and clicking it when you think they're about to do the right thing, it's going to get confusing because you're clicking and saying, yes, you've done the right thing at all these random times that aren't what you've actually wanted. So before you actually come to training your bird or training your dog and getting to utilizing a clicker in training, take the time to learn how to use it. Sit there out of their earshot because you don't want to confuse them, and just click it a bunch of times, get used to how it sits in your hand, how you want to hold it, play games and have fun where you learn how to be more precise. Now, my favorite game with this that I've played with a few of my significants actually is it's kind of like Simon Says or like Warmer, the hot cold game, except you're not allowed to talk or give any hints. The only thing you're allowed is a clicker. And basically how this game would function is you and a friend or a family member would stand in a room. You're gonna pick an object that you want them to touch or pick something that you want them to sit down on. You're gonna have a designated behavior that you want them to perform, and you're gonna use the click every time they're getting warmer or anytime they're going towards the right behavior. And this is teaching you how to click to get someone to do a certain behavior, to get the behavior you want out of your animal. You're learning how to click very precisely, you're learning how to communicate with the clicker, while simultaneously just having fun laughing at your friend or your family member's inability to understand what you want. And this makes it so easy to understand whether or not you're good with a clicker. Because if you're clicking and you're trying to get them to touch something in the room and they're on the other side of the room and they're confused as heck, odds are your clicking is a little confusing. And there is some degree of learning curve for both of you here, but you should be able to hit the end goal if you're clicking correctly. If every time they look, you click. If every time they turn their body towards it, you click. Whereas if you're waiting for them to lollygag around and end up accidentally stumbling at the right destination, odds are they're going to be wandering around the room for hours on end because they don't know what you want. And that's exactly what's going to happen with your bird. That's exactly what's going to happen with any animal that you train. If you're waiting around for behavior to happen and you're not clicking fast enough, or you're clicking too much and anything they're doing is the right thing, your communication becomes muddled, it becomes unclear what you really want, and it gets so difficult for them to figure out what you want. And we can start to get frustrated when we're training our animals because we don't understand that we're not being clear with our communication. So taking that time to teach yourself how to use a clicker before just assuming that you're going to know how to use it, because trust me, it's not quite as simple as it can seem to be, and you can get so frustrated because you think you're being clear and you think that what you want is so simple, but if you aren't reinforcing correctly and you aren't marking the right behaviors, it's not as simple as you think it is. And you'll learn that very quickly as you play those games where you just click with your friend. around the room, seeing if they'll do the right behaviors, and it's not making sense. It's honestly one of my favorite things to do because you can both easily communicate with one another. It's very easy for you to just stop in the middle of that and go, I can't believe you couldn't figure out how to touch that lamp, or I can't believe you couldn't figure out how to sit on the floor. And they'll sit there and they'll say, well, you kept clicking when I was facing this way, or I kept hearing the clicking when I was doing this, so I thought that this was where I wanted to go. And it's very easy for you to understand how to improve your ability to use a clicker and become a better trainer. So that's kind of it for clickers. That's all I've really got to say about them. No, you do not have to train with them. You can absolutely train your bird without them. It's not a necessity. If you can't get a clicker, or your parents won't let you get one, or you just can't afford them, or whatever, it's not a necessity. The important thing is that you're consistent with the way you're reinforcing, that you're marking the right behaviors when you see them. All that a clicker is there to do is to make it a little easier for you to communicate and to make it a little easier for your bird to understand what you're trying to communicate. It just helps bridge that gap a little bit more. You can absolutely train without it. It's just that sometimes behaviors take a little bit longer to learn because that communication gets a little bit more blurry and it can take a little bit longer to figure things out. And that's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with taking those extra moments to figure things out. There's nothing wrong with having those communication problems, as long as you're willing to work through them and find different ways to resolve them. If you're going to make a noise with your mouth instead, if you're just going to say yes and you're just going to use good, absolutely. Go right ahead. There's nothing wrong with using those. You don't need to use a device from a store to achieve the same thing, just as long as you try to remain as consistent and as precise with your reinforcing as possible. So I think that's going to about do it for today's video. I hope this kind of cleared things up a little bit. I have done a different video on training tips that kind of broad spectrum covers things to make training a little bit easier, a little bit more fun. If you guys want to check that out and learn some more things, go right ahead. It's up there. I'll link it in the corner or at the end of this video, whatever I decide to do. Yeah, so I hope that you guys learned some things about clickers and what they're for and kind of why we use them nowadays, and answered some of the questions that you guys were having down below, because I know there was a lot of confusion of people not knowing what they were, if they needed them, and things like that. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!